Troy, I might hand over to you, mate, to get the show on the road.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll get this underway. Now, there is volume with this. This first little bit, obviously, we're just introducing Alan, giving you a little bit of background behind him. So these are photos here that I actually took myself as a young junior, back when Alan was judging. He may have been responsible for getting me addicted to budgies. Yeah, we're looking through a couple of Alan's national winners. Gives you a bit of an idea too, going back as far as 2004 there, 2009. You can start to see the change in the birds. Through to Alan's 2018 national winning recessive pied.
Here we are at the Aviaries of Alan Rowe, champion breeder from Victoria. He's been breeding and showing Budgerigars for over 60 years, and one of the top breeders in Australia from 16 national classes. And I think you're interested in what he's got to say today about his birds and breeding. Alan has 4 flights, outside flights, which flies about 200 birds. Most varieties he's covering at the moment. And we'll have a look at some of the younger birds we've seen this year in the second. These are some of the older birds. But, so these are the first round babies. Through their Malt L or halfway. Just at the ugly stage. The yellow birds, some of them are dark-eyed seals. And you're breeding them to help the club, but yeah, competition, field competition. Yep. Okay. And as far as breeding a lesser variety like that, we found in our club that that's really helpful because we try and get each breeder to take on a lesser variety, don't we? And consequently on the show bench, at the state championship competitions, our club's very successful because we can normally kill header birds in nearly every variety. Is Al going from his bird room? So his aviary across into his bird room, which has been built on the end of the house. When he constructed the house, he made the bird room part of it. It looked like a garage on this. Okay, so we're coming into the bird room. How many breeding cages have you got, Al? 64. I only use about 60 of them, and the others are held in holding cages for the babies. Okay. So it's a pretty big room. And unusually clean at the moment. It's a standing joke in our club. You can see it's quite a very good bird room set up. There's a seed bins and showcase bench. You've got the sink over there. There's plenty of light in the room. Fresh air through the windows. Air flows through. Yeah, blender for his soft food. So we're in the bird room now. Alan just wants to explain a couple of things about his breeding setup. But cages are 7 centimetres long. Most likely a little bit bigger than a lot of the ones that we see. the birds have got to fly from perch to perch, not hot. The other thing that I'd like to point out is these hides that I put in, when they sit before they're ready to leave the nest, we've got full width of the cage, and my food worms got to get away from the parents. And if it's a really nestling really worried about it, I'll put a hide each end. Okay. And then you're reading in here, you've got some seed bottle at the back with standard budgie seed in that, is that correct? Yes. Right. And when you put in the water, I notice you've got something in there. Green soldier bed seed. Yep. Okay, and they get that how easily to that? They get that for 2 days, and then they have a couple of days of clean water, fresh water. Yep. And then they get it again. Okay. And you put anything else in the water? No. Okay. And this is what, soft food or? No, that's tonic seed. Tonic seed, right? And then the finger drawers? Finger drawers, Murphy's, right, in one side, which is hard to keep up with. They really get into that. Yep. So if they're on them, they eat that Murphy's. Yeah. One of the benefits of the Murphy's is the droppings in the nest box are usually nice and dry and like pellets. And you don't get the wet nest box. No, but that's if they eat the Murphy's. I can show you one as we get down there. Okay. And the other one's just going to do off to the top food. Okay. We'll show you. Yep. Yep. Now, look at some babies that are in the baby cage. Old baby in this cage. This is my second round bird. Baby. Yep. Next lot, there's a very nice AAVA balloon there that I expect to turn into a pretty good baby. Alright. You've got quite a few varieties now. Yeah, I've got. You need the good normal. Yeah, we don't got anything with the breeding. Yeah, I've got normal, recessives, and breeding pellets and fellows, the cod purposes. And there's some dark old crews. That's not a bad fellow there. It'll turn out okay. I'm reasonably happy with it. I think I've got a better one in the nest. For younger babies here, water is where they can get to it, very important. And a few of them I do have to feed. I take them away very early, so getting attacked. And very surprising how quick some of them eat at a young age. So this is the end of the second rounder. Now I noticed on your nest box card now we've just got some blank for paper with numbers on there. What sort of records do you keep on your birds? Well, I've got a book that most cases I get the ring number in the bird where they're from. Yep. And so that's a very basic. None things not too hard. No, so it's all manual, no computer. No computer. And you've been doing that way for a long time. That's right. I can show you a picture that goes back when we bought the bird into England. 1990. Okay. There's a few babies there Thursday. I expect them to turn into good babies. They're very young at this stage. So, hopefully, I like that bloke up on the first. He's got a bit. Get a leg for that one. Yep. We talked before about breeding a lesser variety for the club, and Alan's been doing, for the last couple of years, he's been breeding fallows, and he reckons he's got a winner in England at the moment. So, no, they're improving. This is a hen, a fallow hen. Hold it still there for now. Have a look. It says you bird on the left was 1918 national winner, and the other bird's his son, who came second last year. The bird that beat him was bred off one of mine. Lovely variety, good big spots, plenty of width. These birds have just come out of the breeding box. Yep. And so have a look at them. Alan, one of the things that you're famous for is preparing your birds to show. I think out of most of all the people that I know in our club, you probably do it better than anybody else, and I think nationally you're known for that. So Alan's caught this opaline light green cockbird up out of the Aviaries, and he's got a bit of flecking, and Alan's going to show you what he's talking about and show you what he does in his preparations to show. So I'll hand over to Alan. Okay, the birds at the moment, I found it hard to find a bird with a full set of spots to look good when I finish preparing the spot. Get back to the species. It all starts in the nest box, handing the bird in the holding cage until they're strong enough to go outside. They've got to relax in the show cage to really show them what they've got. So, about 8 weeks before the show, you've got to catch the birds and see how their tail went, if they've got damaged tail. It all comes back with observation. If there's just grown a new tail, you wouldn't pull that out. And it takes 8 weeks to grow a tail. So it starts 8 weeks before the show. I don't put them in until about 2 weeks before the show. I want them to stay in the Aviaries, if they don't damage themselves as far as fighting and pulling attachments in the holding cage. Now, this bird hasn't got a full set of spots. I couldn't find one. And so I'm going to show you it will be left with a shadow spot in place of the full spot. Now, I spot the bird a week before the show because it gives the feathers a chance to mark feathers and spots come back into the and also you can miss a spot, one can be hiding underneath, and that'll make itself appear or can appear, and you catch them up 2 days later. Some people leave it till the very day before the show because they're scared of losing the spot, so they don't have to use their shadow spots and stuff. So, but I like to do the week before. When you bring them in, you've got to spray them every second day. And you always get them sprayed to start with. Soak them really, very wet. And some people dip them in the water completely, so I don't do that. So every second day, no spray the last day before the show. I'll just pop this there. You hold the bird, you can put it on the top of his head so that he can't twist and turn and so you pull one spot out. So you've got to start with a little obvious one first, the little one. So I noticed you use your fingers, Al, and a lot of people use tweezers. Yep. Now, just on the tweezers, I actually have seen, I use a pair of, you can buy them from the chemist, they're ladies' eyebrow pluckers, they're like a pair of scissors with a tweezer end on it. Right. Am I still on that? Yep. The shadow spots are a little bit not as bright in colour, little bit different shape. So this is the shadow top here. So I'll do one side. There's another little and what you've got to do, if there's any spots or little ones sticking out from under the two plastics, they're going to come out. Any pin feathers, you can get rid of the sheet, just with a fingernail or a toothbrush, and it's amazing how you can change the bird if the pink wasn't good enough to show into a bird that can do it right on the shading. So the sheet just come off. You'll notice that this bird is a bit flex. He will most likely, he would be penalised under the new rules, I would say. But it's very hard to get a clean-headed opaline. If you do get a clean-headed opaline, they're invaluable for cleaning up fleckage on the normal. So now we've got the finished, now that we've got the finished product as far as the spots go. I do like to put a little bit of clear oil on the finger, just to brighten them up. You're not allowed to discolour them, but you can, what olive oil? Vegetable oil it is. So you can see it makes a big difference. Okay. Right. So after you've spotted him out, Al, what's next, mate? If they've got bent tails look like you've got to dip them in hot water, and when I do that, I don't put them back in the shade cage because they could damage them again, I put them back into a holding cage. Right. So he's pretty placid on the perch. And that's what you want them to do, isn't it? Yeah, nicely placid on the perch. And you get that's from what, handling them a lot, eggs from babies. Yep. Well, yeah. And it's just settling them down. Yeah. This is the first time these babies have been in the cage, but they're very young. They don't know any different. Right. I'll take a soft food mix. There's some really top breeders these days, those soft food mixes. When we're overseas, all the top breeders over there saying that you've got to feed soft food mixes. And so if you get some complicated ones, well, let's take it simple. And as you will see, start off with, otherwise supposed to be wholemeal bread. I then put in 5 milk arrowroot biscuits. The old egg and biscuit soup. Then I use a bit of aniseed to try and coat the ones that are done. Not all of them are really done, about half of the bird pieces stuff. I'll still give them a little bit, the ones that are 36. But quite often they don't eat it. And then I put in a spoonful of a big heap spoonful of protein powder. And I'm going to give a mix up. What was that you could put in? I'm just putting 2 hard-boiled eggs, and in my opinion, that's the main ingredient in that substance. That's That's the main thing. So, I know a few birds that at least one, they always go and stick a hard boiled egg in the cage.
And how often do you give this to them, Al? Every day?
Every day. I might just one a week or so. But every day. And it's clean.
Okay, can we have a look at it?
What's the reason? Yeah, the meat isn't really sloppy. It's not a bad consistency.
And over the years, Al, because you've been breeding for 60 years, have you changed that soft food mix much over the years, or it's been fairly much the
No, I
same?
haven't changed much. You can put carrot in it. But I haven't really changed much. I just started using that protein mix. I was doing that at the supermarket. Well, that's good. It's supposed to be doing protein.
Yeah. Now,
Some of them
you just give them a finger draw of that. That's all they did, is it?
well, no. I'm retired, so I spend a fair bit of time there. If they eat it, I top it up.
Okay.
So,
And the babies in the baby cage that come out up there.
my handful now again.
Okay.
So at the moment, there's not many babies. You're at the end of their second round.
Oh, good. That's good, Al. Thank you.
That's all right.
All right, we will get that off. All right, Alan, thank you very, very much for joining us. And
Hello, Troy.
big
Pleasure.
thank you to Vic Murray for his assistance in making my job really, really simple and making me look very good tonight. It was very easy to put together. Now, Al, I believe you've got a few birds to show us. Do you want to pull a couple of those up and we'll have a look at them?
Yep. Now we've got
Just lift him a little bit higher. There we go. Perfect.
two recessives here. One of them came second in the national 2 years ago. The other one's his brother. Their father won the national the year before. You can see pretty good variety. Although they wouldn't want to have any more wing markings, you're only supposed to have between 10 and 20% wing markings. Nice big spots. I like budgies with big spots and plenty of width. So they're actually, all these birds have been dragged out of the breeding cage actually, Troy. So they most likely got a few problems around the face. So they're the recessive. This is an AOV opaline that won champion UBC in the Victoria Shield 3 years ago. He also won the diploma at Eastern District Show. He came second in our Young Bird Shield, went to the National, but he got attacked in the cage and he had a head full of blood and didn't do any good. But the winner was a bigger bird and he wouldn't have beaten at any rate. And that's a very nice daughter that he's bred this year that I think is going to turn into a pretty good budgie.
She's a lovely hen.
I think so, yes. So the flecking, I'd pass him if I was judging him, but there's a couple of judges think he's got too much. So the flecking's going to be pretty interesting from now on.
Certainly going to be a transition from what we've had.
Pardon?
I said it's certainly going to be a transition from what we've experienced in the past.
Yes. Here are two white-capped cocks.
Just lift them up fraction.
Sky blue. Yep. Sky blues, regional. I like the sky blues because you know, get that sea foam look is what they were originally called. And one of them's a black ringer, others a red ringer. But they're a very strong mutation. And Kevin O'Callaghan got them going and put good birds into them. And I've also good normals to them. I started off with one cinnamon bird, a cinnamon white cap. I bought at auction of Kevin's. I started off with that one bird. I've since kept the cinnamon and opaline out of them if I can.
Yep. Can you just lift that?
Two white green cockbird brothers.
There we go. That's better.
Is that it?
Yep.
And starting to get nice square faces. Could be a little bit longer in the body, but a couple of birds that I'm pretty pleased with, both black ringers. There's two Lutino black wing cockbirds that I think would have been competitive, but I'm struggling a bit to get numbers, but I've one of them, as you can see, is feeding babies, and the other one's got fertile eggs. I've always had a soft spot for the Lutes, and they've been good to me over the years, and so I think they're worth a look at.
They're certainly a very rich colour, aren't they?
Yes, the strange thing there is quite a few of them are bred through grey greens, so it doesn't seem to affect the colour.
Well, that's good. Excellent. Now, Al, last night when we were talking, you mentioned that you wanted to clarify about the water that you were using. You mentioned that you use apple vinegar periodically along with the Vetifarm, the breeder D3. Is that correct?
Yep. And the thing I didn't mention is that once a week I put apple cider vinegar in the flights in the water once a week.
Yep. And you're doing that as a preventative for things like the going light and the megabacteria?
Yep.
One of the other things that you mentioned you wanted to touch on in your show preparation, you said there was an important step you were missing at the 6 and 3 week mark leading up to a show.
Yeah, well, at least 6 weeks before the show, I spray the whole flock with the Vetifarm avian insect liquidator. And very important, you can see the birds, as soon as you spray them, they start preening their feathers, and you can see them improving in front of your eyes, basically. And then I do them again in another 3 weeks to get rid of anything that's hatched and that sort of thing. So that's very important.
And that's a drowning spray, like a lot of it, not.
Well, if you're spraying a lot of birds, it's pretty hard. The birds that you're particularly interested in, you make sure they get a really good going over. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned in the video about the importance of a young stud. Can you expand on that for us, particularly the young hens?
Well, you know, I really think that the young hens, what I say isn't gospel, and there's no rules breeding budgies. It's just, you know, you've just got to take it that it's a general opinion, and there's no rules. I like the young hens. Basically, 1 and 2 year old hens are your breeders. Some people say, oh, look, I've had a 4 year old hen that breed good, but that's the exception rather than the rule. And I think, you can take back to laying fowls. The pullets, the ones that lay, they get a bit older, they go off the lay. And so I'm a big one for young hens. Yep. And they can be from 7 months old, as long as they're through the molt and got body weight. They've got to have body weight.
Now, in terms of the stud, one of the things you pointed out in the video that Vic did was about the chick hides. How often do you check those chick hides? Is that something you do every time you're out there having a look around?
Pardon,
the chick hides, so the little hides that you've got built in the breeding cage.
Oh, yes, yep.
How often are you checking those just to make sure that the parents haven't savaged them, or are they generally pretty reliable?
Oh, look, they're pretty reliable, but as I said to Vic when he asked me about the finger drawers, I'm retired, so I spend a fair bit of time in there. And if they're very young and they jump out, well, I put them back in the nest box. But they really soon learn to run in those hides, and they're pretty good. I've only had one bird this year that the hen tried to get, and that was my fault because I didn't have the hide in the cage early enough. And, so look, I've run about 280 birds this year, and I haven't had any real disasters.
Yep.
So, yeah. So I think they're good. And as I said to Vic, if you've got a pair that's got really good chicks, well, I'll put a hide in both ends of the cage, but usually I put them in the area away from the nest box, furthest away.
Yep. So that makes sense. Al, what is in your tonic seed? Is that you mentioned you've got the tonic seed in the breeding cages? What is that?
Oh well, that's a mixture that one of our seed suppliers down here mixes up. It's got a little bit of Niagara. It's really I think the canary breeders use it a fair bit, and I mix that, and I also put in oats, whole oats, not hulled, and I mix them together and I put them in there, and they look forward to they eat it. I really think it kicks them on a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Tell me, you've obviously been in the hobby now for 60 plus years. What would you put down as your greatest achievement thus far in 60 years?
Well, my thoughts are that it's that I was invited to judge at the BS show in England in 2013, and to me that's the pinnacle of judging, and so that gave me a great thrill to be invited to judge over there. I judged all the grey greens, 128 I think, and that was the biggest class of any of the birds that had to be judged. Some of the varieties over there, they didn't have many entries at all. So that was good. There was a fair bit of pressure I was under a fair bit of pressure to start with, but once you start, it was fine. The budgies are the same all over the world, really.
Yep. And flipping to the opposite side of that, what would you say has been your greatest disappointment in Budgerigars? Has there been anything as disappointing as the 1980 Collingwood performance against the Tigers?
I had a bigger disappointment last week, mate, when we only had 1 goal to 3/4 time. No, look, I've really had a pretty good run with the budgies. I think the biggest disappointment is the fact that, and it was my own decision, is to retire from judging. I missed that, but I know it was the right decision. I've seen some judges over the years just continue to keep judging past their ability, and really a lot of people put a lot of work into getting these birds to that stage, national level, and it's not fair for them not to be judged properly, in my opinion. And whilst I believe I could still do it, there's a cut-off date somewhere, and I've made that date. And as I said, I get a bit I miss it, but that's about, I suppose that's all, the only way I could answer your question there, mate.
Yep. No, that's fair enough. Something that's very topical at the moment is imports. Very curious to hear your thoughts on the topic.
Well, I have judged the overseas birds on a few occasions, and we went to Mooch and Gladbach in 2010, judged a German show there. Then I judged at the BS show in 2013. 2017, I was at Budapest, and I was lucky enough for Daniel Lutoff showed, and he had some wonderful birds. But in our travels, we've called into quite a few aviaries. Lee Downey's has been my sort of unpaid manager, and between us, we've been on a few safaris and looked at all these overseas birds, and not all the breeders have got these birds, and so I was in the original birds in from England, and so it would be hypocritical to say they shouldn't bring them in. And I think when they do bring them in, they'll certainly help us. But they're a different mutation. Or I believe they're a mutation. They've got the long, loose feather. Our birds are pretty good budgies. They just haven't got that bit of feather, loose feather on top. They say that they've come from a long-tailed mutation, and we haven't got that in Australia. So, as you mentioned before, if you look back at the national winners for the last, from 10 years ago on, the birds are improving every year. So, another 10 years, where's Australia birds going to be? They couldn't look like those birds over there. But as I said, not everyone's got those birds, and I'd say that some of the syndicate members would mostly be pretty disappointed with what they end up with when they get back here, I'd say. So look, you get them from the right source, and we're not allowed to get them from Switzerland at this stage, I don't think, but you've got to get them from people like Daniel Lutoff or the Halen Partnership. Those guys work in together, and that's where you have to get them.
Tell us, what do you feel has been the greatest improvement in the birds since the imports came in? We obviously started with certain birds, and you touched on there. We saw the birds from 2004 that were winning. Those birds obviously you've surpassed, and those birds wouldn't win that same class today. What have you seen as the greatest improvement in your mind since the imports have come in the 90s?
Well, they've just got better feather direction, pretty wider heads. With the first birds that come in, a lot of them were small. There was depends where you got them from. The Williams birds were small, but I got my birds from a Yorkshireman and a retired judge by the name of John Heald, and the Yorkshire people up north really love big-shouldered birds. They wouldn't stand for the small birds. But look, we've got a lot of good breeders in Australia, and they've done a terrific job. Some of those birds now have got lovely feather and faces, and so they have improved a lot in that area. Yeah.
And what about the hobby in general over your 60 years in the game, forgetting the Budgerigar itself and how it's changed? How have you seen the actual hobby change?
Well, just everything's got a lot more professional. The national show concept was one of the best things that ever happened in Australia. The guys that sorted that out, to me, deserve a lot of accolades. That we haven't had to change what they set up, and I can't see any reason to change anything. So the nationals each year has turned into a big deal, and that's the biggest change. And as I said, and now of recent times, of course, you've got the social media, Facebook, and all that sort of thing, and which the people long time in the older days, wouldn't have even believed could happen, sort of thing.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about your breeding program. You mentioned you're up after you returned for the Nationals, so I'm assuming somewhere around the Queen's birthday long weekend. And you said you run through until early the following year, so you might get 60 rings on at that changeover transition time. Tell us, during the breeding season, how long do you generally run your artificial lighting for in the breeding room, and how many hours a day would you personally spend up there tending to the birds? What's your investment?
Well, the lights come on at 6 o'clock in the morning and go off about 8:30 in the night, and they're on all day. And as far as the time I spend there, I'd say I spend at least 4 hours a day, at least. There's always something to be done. There's 50 odd pairs there, and so to look after them properly, I spend a lot of time there, and it gives me an advantage being a retired person to be able to do that. Like if a chick hatches and 2 hours later it's not fed, I can move it onto a pair that I know are feeding. Yep. And then if I hear a bit of squawking going on, well, I know there's a chick either going to get his head knocked off or, he's getting it knocked off. So I can save all those sorts of things.
Yep. So speaking of one-day-old chicks, how does Alan Rowe gauge whether he's had a good, bad, or indifferent breeding season? Is it the mortality rate of the one-day-olds and the chicks? Is it the numbers on the perch? Is it quality? What's your yardstick? How do you define if you've had a good season?
Well, I've had a good season if I don't have to get rid of too many when they first come out of the nest box, out of the nest. And I really like to have lots of young hens, and then I suppose the ultimate icing on the cake is if you can win a national. You've had a good season if you win a national.
Yeah. Tell us, what do you not suffer well in the bird room? What doesn't get a run in Alan's bird room? Is it something? Is it long flights?
Yeah, it definitely is long flights. I was involved. Well, when before the English birds, the last importation come in 30 years ago, Australia had a big problem with long flighted birds. Anything that had a nice big head had big wings, and they were ugly wings. They weren't long, really long, narrow flights. They were thick secondary flights, and they were ugly. So I really can't stand them, and so you won't find any birds there with long flights. I like width between the eyes, and I like a bit of shape. So I try and breed birds that look like the standard. It's a challenge, but it's so. But the long flights is definitely no, and I like big spots.
Okay. Talking about feathers, I'm interested to hear your theory on French malt. Would you breed with a bird with missing feathers flights, tails, etc.? How do you feel it's passed around the bird room?
Look, if I knew that answer, I'd most likely get a science award, mate. Look, this year I haven't had one French Malter. I've done nothing different to other years. My theory is it's something that affects the blood flow to the feathers, and I don't know what causes that, a virus of some sort, or that's what they claim it is, a virus. But you know, as we all know, there's no rules like you can have a nest of birds, one with French malt, the other's okay. But we do know that it usually appears a bit later in the breeding season, and when it starts, well, you're not going to stop it.
Speaking of the season, what is your goal this season? What are you setting out to improve across the stud? Is there a certain focus, or is there a bit of a labour of love like the recessives or the fallows or the dark-eyed clears? Are you trying to do something with the birds this season to increase the width a bit more, increase the blow a bit more, increase the mouth? Is there something specifically in your head you've set out to achieve in 2020?
There's no, all I've set out to do is try and breed good budgies, mate. Everything that goes in the breeding cage is, you know, is put there to breed a good bird. Believe it or not, the dark-eyed clears are improving, and definitely improving, and the fallows are improving, but the fallows are slow. It's been a long, hard row there. I've been breeding them for about 4 years now, and I'm just starting to get a couple, just starting to get a bit of feather and face.
Yeah.
But you can't beat a good normal.
No, this is true. Tell us, how closely do you inbreed your birds? Do you pair half brother, half sister, or do you go cousins, or do you try and do complete outcross birds? Some very different theories across the spectrum from different breeders overseas. What do you do?
Well, I do line breed, but not close, and you can't do it for any more than a couple of years. You know, I do line breed, but you can't do it for too long, and you can't do it too close. I think, I don't know if you've seen it, but Marty Halen did a presentation at the Budapest show, the World Show, and the basis of that was visual compatibility, and his thoughts were you only line breed to fix a good point. Now, there's no good line breeding if the birds aren't good budgies. It's wasting your time. So, and then, you know, if you read Harry Bryan's book, his theory was that these birds were all started off as wild little budgies, and if you keep putting them together long enough, that's what you'll end up with. So,
all right. In a visual pair of birds, so when you're pairing up, when you're coming up with your strategy, do you avoid any pairings? You know, like a grey-green to a grey-green, or a grey to a grey, dominant pied to dominant pied. Is there?
Yeah, I don't double up on greys or grey-greens if I can help it. Look, you've got to work with what you've got, and sometimes you're sort of backed into a corner, and you've got to put two together like that. But I like to put a grey-green to a light green, or a grey-green to a sky blue. You know, I don't like double up on factors like that. Cinnamons are the same. Try and make a cinnamon or normal. I haven't got any opaline cocks in the breeding cage at the moment. I've got the split opalines and opaline hens. So, you know, and there's some varieties that you just don't mix up, like clear bodies and spangles. and that sort of thing. So yeah, the colour does come into it, but sometimes you've got no say in it. Like this year, I had to pair white cap to white cap in a few occasions. I run out of good normals, and so consequently, I bred some double factor white caps, which I wasn't trying to do because there's no show classification for them. Yep. But you get normals, white caps, and double factors. But you've just got to work with what you got.
No, that makes good sense. El, tell us a little bit about your journey with the recessives. You said you only got into those a few years ago, and obviously in 2018 you won the nationals. You mentioned last night about putting your best normals into them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that journey on taking on board that variety and how you've obviously accelerated that to winning a national as quickly as you did?
Well, you breed these for a start. I really like recessive pies. They're a very attractive bird, and I never ever bred them for a long while. They were pretty ordinary standard for a long while, and so but then when the English birds come in, they improved. There's a few people got them in, and I was at an auction. I bought a couple of Steve Gretsch recessives one day, and paired them to my normals, bred some splits, got a couple of other outcrosses at the auctions, and I've been working on them. This will be the 6th year, and so with the 5th year, I won the national, got 1st and 2nd in the national with them, and they've been a pretty good family of birds, those ones. But I did say this year I've had to pair a couple of occasions recessive to recessive, and the chicks have been a bit disappointing in size. So I'm now pairing some the recessives over some good hens, normals and opalines, and I'm going to get some first cross splits for next year. Yeah. So, but it did give me a fair bit of satisfaction to win that recessive class after just, you know, starting off with them not long ago and working on them. Give me a lot of satisfaction.
I can appreciate that, because I think the number of variety wins that you've had across your 16 is, you know, incredible. It's to be marvelled at. You've won everything from normals to recessive guides and done very, very well. Which I guess leads me into my next question. Somebody coming into the hobby, a beginner, what advice would you recommend to them, and how do you think they can best learn?
Well, for a start, they've got to get fixed in their mind what a good bird looks like. So they've got to go to the budgie shows, the better shows, see what birds are doing good on the bench. They've got to show a bit of. They've got a steward with the top judges if they can, and they'll learn a bit there. They've got to see if they can align themselves up with a good experienced breeder at the club. If they come to the club and steward and show the people that they are interested, well, they will get help. Now, I'd tell them not to worry about these big high-priced birds. Quite often, the 3rd or 4th best birds in the nest are the ones that breed the good birds. So, you know, I try and steer them in that direction. Also, they've got to keep the standard in mind. The standard is what you've got to be aiming for, and so they've got to keep that in the back of their mind. And also, you know, I say, well, you've got to have a bit of a fun with these birds, and you've got to pick a variety that you like. And so you know, just tell them to enjoy the hobby. And at the moment, United Budgie Club is the one I'm with, and the one that Vic Murray's with, has got nearly 30 beginners and intermediate members there, and that's basically because Vic is our designated beginner mentor, and he does a fantastic job, and people join the club just to get the help. So you know, that's about all I can tell you about that.
That's a very good answer, very comprehensive answer. What do you think we can do? And this may be a question Vic might be able to answer, but what do you think we can do to encourage new members into the hobby? So United is doing a very good job of maintaining those beginners that are coming in and those intermediate members. What can we do to create that transition from somebody who's got an interest in native birds or a pet budgerigar, migrating them over to the exhibition side of the hobby where, you know, you are renowned for your competitiveness, getting somebody joined in that side of it, and in the exhibiting side of the hobby? How do you think we can go about that?
Well, over the years, we've had committees to try and improve the flow of people into the game, and at the moment, whilst I'm not into that side of things, the Facebook pages and seem to be creating a lot of interest and creating a lot of beginners into our club, and so you know, I think that's the way to go and it seems to be working as far as we're concerned. Like Vic runs our Facebook page too and our website, and so they get a lot of help there.
Yep, no, that's good to hear. That's the end of my sort of questions that I generally had. I've got a couple come through on the chat here that I'll throw at you. One of the questions asked was, how do your aviary birds go with the heat of summer? You've obviously got them outside. There's tin, there's no insulation. How do they go on those 42-degree Melbourne days?
Well, on the really hot days, they just all get down on the floor, and I've actually got a sprinkler system on the top and turn if I want to, but I don't turn it on unless it gets to about 35. But they just get down on the floor and don't move. So the heat's okay. Up until this very recently, I had open flights, and every time it rained, I had to go in and clean. If there's any seed got on the floor, I had to go and clean it every time, and I couldn't put babies out there. And the hawks used to land on the flight and think they're going to eat my birds, and then overnight night the owls used to do the same thing. So I decided I'd cover them in my laser light, and at this stage I think it's the best thing I could ever do, but I'm just waiting to see what happens in the really hot days. Yeah. So but for a long while I was certain that they had to have rain and all the rest of it.
Okay. How do they go with the concrete floors in the winter in the aviaries? Is there any issues with them being down and getting cold feet?
No, the concrete floor is not a problem, mate. And quite often there's a bit of seed on the floor anyway, husk, so.
Okay, so that might have been cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you go with coccidiosis from the wild birds? Is that ever a problem for you?
No, it doesn't seem to be. I don't, you know, look, I think I was saying with the, when you're preparing, there's a fair bit of observation when you're looking at preparing your birds for the shows and that sort of thing. And the same with sick birds. If you get a bird starting to get sick, that's the time to isolate it and treat it. And if the treatment doesn't work, well, the bird's gone and you've got a healthy flock. Yeah. So I've never had it treated them for coccidiosis. Never had it. that I know of.
That you know. I've just had another question come through. Somebody's asked, they said they noticed a crop needle on your sink. Do you top up the babies at night time with the extra feed?
Well, I take the babies away pretty early, and if they're not eating of a night, I feel them if they haven't got food in their crop, I'll feed them, and those ones I'll feed them 3 times a day: morning, lunchtime, night. And if I've got a pretty good budgie in a nest and I don't think they're getting topped up enough, I will give them a bit of a top up, is help things along a bit. I use arrowmeat biscuits, and I find them as good as anything.
Okay,
They're not sticky. In the crop needle, yeah.
Okay, nice. All right. Well, I think that's by the look of the questions coming through on the side there. I think I've covered them all off. Is there anything else you had for the group tonight, Al?
Not really. I thought you would have caught up with everything, mate.
No, I think I've certainly asked enough questions. Thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you for your time. And thanks again to Vic for his efforts in going over and filming that and making it all happen. Between the two of you, you did an exceptional job. And thank you to your grandkids for lending you the PC for the night and facilitating this Zoom chat. I'm sure everyone online appreciated it. So I'll hand us back to Chris.
Thanks, Troy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. We've much appreciated you coming on board. Chris, are you about?
Yes, mate. Thank you. Thanks.